better next time. So if you talk about a controversial subject, saucy topics, then everybody will be all in. Whether they agree or disagree, you're going to get feedback. If you're just going to talk about Shalach Manos and say a couple of sources, but next time we'll talk about maybe something more controversial. But anyways, the Ramah writes in Chaim and Simon Tafresh Tzadik Hey, we're going to talk about Shalach Manos today. In Sif Daled he says, V'im Shalech Manos L'Re'eyu. If somebody sends, if you send Shalach Manos to your friend, and your friend does not want to accept the Shalach Manos, or he's Michael you, says, I don't want to take it, give it to somebody else, you are Yoitze, you're Yoitze Yidei Chayvasa, you fulfilled your obligation. The Pri Chadash, who was one of the Gdolei at Weizkin, I think he was born in Italy and he passed away in Eretz Yisrael. He led a fascinating life. So he writes, he wants to know where is the source for the Ramah to come up with this psak din. He doesn't understand. So there's a Karban Asano who on the Rush in Maseches Megillah Sivan Zayin the Karban Asano says as follows: that the makar of the Ramah is from a Gemara Nedarim Daf Samach Gimel. The Gemara says like this: that if Reuven tells Shimon, Kainam, I'm taking a neder, I'm taking a vow on myself that I am not allowed to have anah from you, that I, Reuven, cannot have anah from you, if you don't come to my warehouse, and take 1 kur of wheat and a couple of barrels of wine to give to your children. So Shimon is not bound by this neder that Reuven made. Shimon can tell him, I'm absolving or dissolving your neder. Shalai al pi chacham, it doesn't even have to go to the Rav, because he can tell Reuven, look, the whole reason why you made this neder was to give me covet. That in order to convince me now to go take presents, wheat and wine for my children, to do something good for me, to do something beneficial to me, and you wanted to be mechabed me, so you made a neder to bind me to it. But I don't want that covet. My covet is that you leave me alone. He's not bound by this neder. Says the same thing, the Karban Asano, the Ramah, this is his source. That if you want to give me Shalach Manos and I don't want to receive the Shalach Manos, I can absolve myself and you could still be Yaitse your Chayva of Shalach Manos. The Chassam Sofer comes along, Migdailei Apaiskim and Arabanim in the last 200 years, Mustamin. Not Mustamin, the Chassam Sofer is mentioned everywhere. Say when it comes to Pshat, Remez, Drus, Soid, he wrote on Chumash, he wrote on Shas, he wrote on Chidushim, he wrote on Halacha, and there isn't a Sefer and Halacha that doesn't quote Chassam Sofer if he speaks on the topic. Even in the Rebbe's own Torah, you see the Chassam Sofer everywhere. So the Chassam Sofer in Chaim and Simon Kuf Tzadik Vav says like this, that the Machlekes, this din of the Ramah really depends on the 2 reasons why we even give Shalach Manos in the first place. The first reason that's brought down in Sfarim why we give Shalach Manos is the reason of the Trumas Hadash and Rabbi Yisrael Israelin. He was either from the last of the Rishonim or the very first of the Achrayim. He lived in the 1500s. And his Piskei Dinim are brought thousands and thousands of times in Paiskim that came after him. And he says the reason why you give Shalach Manos is to be Messiah to your Chaver, that he should have Harvacha, that he should be able to have plenty, and he should be able to be Mekayim the Sudas Purim. It's all about to give somebody the ability to have Sudas Purim. And it says of Chassam Sofer, and this is also, what about an Usher? An Usher has enough for Sudas Purim. He doesn't need you to give him Shalach Manos to have Sudas Purim. So he says, Mikal Makayim Tiknu Chazal Mishloach Manos. Why? L'kol echad ve'echad. He says the Chassam Sofer, Shalei Levayesh es mi she'ein lo. So even though the Usher technically doesn't need Shalach Manos, and the whole real reason of Shalach Manos is that somebody should have enough for a Suda, but even for those who don't need it for that, Lei Levayesh es mi she'ein lo, not to embarrass anybody. Then we have the second reason of Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, the author of Menay Salevi and other Svarim, the famous Shiur, the famous poem of L'Chadaydi that we say every single Friday night was composed by Rav Shlomo Alkabetz. He was in Sfas, obviously. He was a contemporary of the Ramach, the Arizal, the Beis Yosef. Not only that, there's a Shailas V'Tshuvas called Afkas Roichel, which was authored by the Beis Yosef himself, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. And in Afkas Roichel, he refers to Rav Shlomo Alkabetz as Rosh Yeshiva di Yeshiva Seinu. A lashon either like that or very close to it, which means he was a Rosh Yeshiva in the Beis Yosef's Yeshiva. So that itself is the greatest haskama. So he writes, the purpose of Shalach Manos is kedei laharbois achva v'reyos, in order to promote, to increase brotherhood and love. And it's exactly the opposite what the oppressor Haman said. Haman came along and accused Klal Yisrael of being divided. So b'meila, we're going to do Shalach Manos. The takana of Chazal of Shalach Manos is to take the divided and make it united. To take what he pointed out as a flaw and to make it into a positive thing. So now, based off these 2 reasons, says the Chassam Sofer, this we're going to be able to understand the Ramaz din. According to the first reason of the Trumas Hadashin, where the purpose is that somebody should have enough for Sudas Purim. So therefore, if I want to give you Shalach Manas and you don't want to accept the Shalach Manas, I'm not Yaitse. Why? Because I didn't give you anything for your Suda. But according to the Menay Salevi, and the Ramah seems holds like the Menay Salevi, the Paiskim write that the purpose of Shalach Manas is to promote love and brotherhood and to increase the peace, so to speak. So the fact is, when I offer you Shalach Manas, when I want to give you Shalach Manas, even if you don't want to receive it, I'm showing you Ava v'Achva. I'm showing you Shalom. I'm showing that I want to be your friend, and b'meila I am Yaitze Shalach Manas. And the Sam Sefer ends off, Im Kain Yafa Tamal of a Pri Chadash. He likes the Pri Chadash's question. The Pri Chadash challenges the Ramah, where's the source for this? And the Sam Sefer says, the Pri Chadash's question really is, why did the Ramah choose the Menay Salevi over the Trumas Hadashin? Why did he find that the Menay Salevi's reason is better than the Trumas Hadashin's reason? And he agrees with, and he ends off like that. There is a Shailas V'Tshuvas Binyan Sion, Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger. He wrote a very famous sefer called Aruch Laner and others.
Aruch Laner.
But who's this? What's the name?
Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger. He wrote a sefer called. He was in Germany. He was the Rebbe of Rashar Hirsch, of Shamshon Rafal Hirsch. He was his teacher. Harav Dr. Hildesheimer, I believe, was his Talmud as well, and many others. In fact, one of the big Heterim, I wasn't going to speak about this, but one of the big Heterim that we use in Chabad houses to give people aliyahs that are not necessarily Shomer Shabbos and different things like that, come from the Binyan Sin, I think in the Siman Chaf or Chafala for Chav Beis. One of those three, he discusses that the most of the people that are Mechal Shabbos are Tinaika Shenishbu, and they're not necessarily even a mumar, and b'meila you are allowed to be makar of them, and you are allowed, and he had to deal with this. He was a Rav in Germany, and Germany was very modern, and he was a legitimate paisik, and this is something that if you ever get challenged, how does Chabad do X, Y, or Z, the tshuva of the Binyan Sin is a very strong support. So he explains the Ramah differently. In a tshuva in Siman Memdalad, he says that the Ramah, why does the Ramah say that you're Yaitse if I send you Shalach Manas and you don't want to receive it? He says because it says in the pasuk, Mishloach Manas Yishler Eyu. It doesn't say V'nasoin Ma'is to give, it says to send. And the whole Hakpada of Torah is on the Shiluach. As long as it comes from the Mishloach, regardless if it was accepted or not, it only has to do with who's sending it. And even if it was Masarev and he doesn't want it, that you're already Yaitse Shalach Manas. Shita Sarambam B'derech Efsher. I only say B'derech Efsher because I didn't really think about it. The Rambam in Hilchos Megillah Parak Beis Halacha Yazayin says, and this is ungenommen, that it's a greater mitzvah to increase in Matanas Lov Yainim than Shalach Manas. Although there are many Paiskim that say that if you only have enough, if what comes first, Shalach Manas or Matanas Lov Yainim. Many of the Paiskim say Shalach Manas comes before Matanas Lov Yainim. It takes precedence. Why? Because if you go in the order of pasuk, it says Mishloach Manas Ishler Eyu, and then it says Matanas Lov Yainim. And many legitimate Paiskim say that. But the Rambam writes that the greater mitzvah is Matanas Lov Yainim more so than Shalach Manas. What? Laharbais, yes. The mitzvah Yaisa Laharbais from Matanas Lov Yainim.
And he says that if not,
Milaharbais from Mishloach Manas.
he says if not,
Shalach Manas is a chiluk of Matanas Lov Yainim.
Can you combine that?
That's a separate. You're going to go into two separate ways you learn. Is Mishloach Manas part of Sudas Purim? Or there's a whole right? That's what I meant to say.
So, l'chora, you could say that the Rambam holds like the Menay Salevi, that the whole takana of Mishloach Manas is to show Ava v'Achva v'Reis, to show friendship, to show love. And because if you say that he holds like the Trumas Hadashin, which is to help somebody have a soda, then what's the difference between Shalach Manas and Matanas Lov Yainim? They're both the Tevas of Yainim. If the whole purpose of Mishloach Manas is like the Trumas Hadashin, to allow somebody to be able to conduct the Suda, and what about those that don't need? We said, Loi Levayesh, not to embarrass anybody, we give Shalach Manas to everybody. So then, if you want to say that the Rambam holds that, then there's no difference between Matanas Lov Yainim and Shalach Manas. They're one and the same. So he says, so we want to say that the Rambam holds like the Menay Salevi. And this is what, and we'll explain. There's a famous Rashba. The Rashba in Chelik Aleph, Siman Yud Ches. The Rashba gives a klal. The Rabbi mentions this in Likkutei Siddhis many times, that's why I know it. It's not because, that's why it's famous. The Rashba says a klal when it comes to mitzvahs, brachas on mitzvahs, that any mitzvah that's totally in somebody else, that you can't accomplish on your own, you do not make a bracha on. So for example, lulav and esrog and daled minim, I can take my daled minim and it's completely dependent on myself and I can make a bracha on it. Matzah as well. I have a matzah, I can make a bracha on it. But for example, tzedakah. Why isn't there a bracha on the mitzvah of tzedakah? He says because if you're going to make a bracha al nesina tzedakah or whatever, something to that effect, and you're about to give tzedakah, and the ani says, no, I don't want tzedakah from you. I don't want it. So now you made a bracha levatala, or same thing with bikur chaylim. If the person doesn't want to see you now.
Ask Barry if anyone ever said I don't want to talk.
Huh?
Ask Barry if anyone ever said I don't want to talk.
How often you go down to New York and see a bunch of food still sitting there?
Now, so you don't make a bracha on it. That's what the Rashba says. If it's something that's not completely dependent on you don't make a bracha. The Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah Parak Yud Aleph says a different klal. He doesn't take the Rashba's klal. He says that any mitzvah that's bein adam lachaverei, blanket statement, any mitzvah that it's in the realm of bein adam lachaverei, you do not make a bracha. And he doesn't give the Rashba's chiluk if it's dependent on you or on somebody else. And the question is, why doesn't the Rambam accept the Rashba's klal? Why doesn't it flow? So you could say that the Rambam would have a problem with Mishloach manis. Because the Rambam holds like the Mendy Levi. The Rambam, what?
Like this will also, the Rambam has the machlekes. What's the bracha? Allah Mila. If you say if it's your own, okay.
Yeah, say.
No, this place.
Mendy, if you're
You're saying something good.
Why don't you start if you're not going to finish?
So the Rambam holds like the Mendy Levi, that it's because of Ava, Bereus, and love and brotherhood. And therefore, if I'm going to go give you Shalach Manas and you don't want to receive it, so you're Yaitza, like the Ramal Paskins. And in that case, you should be able to make a bracha. Right?
You make a bracha.
You don't on Shalach Manas. According to this, you should be able to make a bracha, because even if he refuses it, you're Yaitza. This is a Yaitza V'Naklal.
The brachas by Megillah is to have in mind all the other
Oh, very good. Very good.
Excellent.
That's a separate thing. That's not a bracha on the mitzvah itself. That's shehachiyonu, that I lived to accomplish another.
No, but and that's why I also said B'derech Hafshir, but it's a good, very good. But anyways, according to this, if the Rambam holds like the Mendy Levi, which means that if I refuse the Shalach Manas, I'm Yaitze. And therefore the Rambam needs another klal, a separate klal, that any mitzvah bein adam lachaveda, you don't make a bracha, and that includes Shalach Manas. You don't have to make a bracha. Fine, and we worked it out. But now we'll get into a couple of differences. Ramosha said 11. I was struggling to find 11. There's more, but some of them are so far-fetched, I didn't even want to talk about them. What are the difference between the two reasons of the Trumas Hadesh and the Mendy Levi practically? So the first one is the case we discussed. If I give Nayach Shalach Manas, Nayach says, Michael Tigris, I don't want. So according to the Trumas Hadesh, I'm not Yaitze, because at the end of the day, I didn't give him anything for his Suda. But according to the Mendy Levi, I am Yaitze because I showed him friendship. He didn't want to receive it, that's on him, but I showed him. A second afkamina is, if I come to give Shalach Manas a couple of minutes before Shkia or before Tzeis, Mamish at the end of the day of Purim, there's no more time for a Suda. There's not enough time for him to sit down and eat from this, and it's not going to add anything to his Suda. So according to the Trumas Hadesh, I'm not Yaitze. Why? Because at the end of the day, there's nothing here to be maspik Sudasei, to help him with his Suda.
But that's you're supposed to give ready food.
Oh, we're going to get there too. Mashenkin, according to the Mendy Levi, Mishum Reis, even if I showed up a minute before the last minute of Purim, the fact is that I came to your house and I brought you a bottle of wine or whatever else that came with it. So b'meila, I am Yaitze because I am showing you a friendship. A third nafkamina is if the Shalach Manas came anonymously. You don't know who sent it to you. For example, they have all of these delivery services today where you can this basket. Let's say they forget to put on a sticker, or they forget to put your name on the sticker, or you order in various stores. They offer a service that they're going to deliver Shalach Manas for you. So in Shailas V'Shuvas Nachlas Ben Yamin, he has a shaila like this. If I send Shalach Manas through a shliach, and the shliach did not tell the mekabel who's receiving the Shalach Manas, who is the shliach, who's sending the Shalach Manas, am I Yaitze or not? And he says, you're not Yaitze. He says, because the Iker Tam is the Mendy Levi, like the Ramah Paskin, more so than the Trumas Hadesh. And because of that, there's no Ava Vereus. You have to know who you're receiving it from to have an affection, to have an appreciation for the person who sent it to you. If you don't know who sent it to you, then how can you have Ava V'Achva to anyone? And he says, and this is the difference between Shalach Manas and Matanas Lav Yainim. When it comes to Matanas Lav Yainim, the hiddur is to be anonymous. That the person shouldn't know who's giving it to him. This is mitzvah and a mufchar. And he cites a Gemara in Ksubas Daf Samach Zayin. The Gemara gives various stories of various chachamim, how they did matan b'seiser, how they gave tzedakah, and even in a way that they had to jump into an oven. And I'm not going to go through the whole amud of Gemara with stories, but they did whatever they can that people should not be able to detect who's the one giving that the receiver should not have any embarrassment by receiving from them. Mashenkin by Shalach Manas, he says you have to be medactic, you have to be meticulous, that whoever receives it must know who sent it. And the Ksav Sefer adds, I mean, I don't know when they lived, if they were contemporaries or not, but he says, no, that this is really totally in the two dinim of the Truma Sadeshan and the B'nai Salevi. That according to the Truma Sadeshan, even if it's anonymous, at the end of the day, if you came to your house and you saw a nice bottle of wine and some good food sitting there on the stoop, and you took it in, and now it enhanced your Sudas Purim, you're Yaitse. Because at the end of the day, the whole purpose of Mishloach Manas is Lahar Boy Suudasai. And that happened. And who cares if I know or if I don't know? But according to the B'nai Salevi, which is to promote friendship, La Yirviach B'zeh Klumi writes, you didn't gain anything because the person who received it doesn't know who to be market taiva to. And he's Messiah, the Ksav Sefer says, he's the son of the Ksav Sefer, Avram Shmuel Binyamin Sefer. He was the Rav of Preshburg as well, after his father, and also from the bigger Paiskim. So he says that because there are Ramah Paskins like the B'nai Salevi, and he says that even if, and in the case that we began with, that if I give you Shalach Manas and you refuse me, I am Yaitse. So B'meila, we learn from here that if someone doesn't know who he got a Shalach Manas from, he's not Yaitse, as we said before. Another nafkamina, what about a Talmud that sends to his Rebbe? And we're talking obviously about Rabbi Amuvak, somebody that learned by somebody for quite a few years, Rav Chachmasa Mimanu, somebody that, a Talmud to a Rav. Can I send Shalach Manas to him? And this is in a sefer called Shilas of Tshuva Shevet Sefer, also an anical from the Ksav Sefer.
Why not?
Huh?
Why would it not?
One second. So he's going to go with the two reasons that we said before. Why not? Because it says in the pasuk Mishloach Manas Ish L'Re'eyu, and your Rav is not Re'eyu, he's not up your friend. You're sitting in the shul, you're schmoozing, you're talking. If somebody's Rabbi Amuvak, we're not talking about someone that you learn two things. Even David HaMelech called Achitayfa Rabbi Elufim Midai, but he wasn't Rabbi Amuvak. And from David HaMelech, he ended up being his chaver, and then he ended up being Gam Ish Loimi Asher B'tachti Boy Asher Yachdav Namtik Sayt B'Veis Elikein and Halach Baragish Asher Yachdav. That they end up being a Talmud, he end up being considered a chaver, and then David HaMelech told him Gam Ish Loimi Asher B'tachti Boy Higdal Alai Akev, which Achitayfel ended up rebelling against David HaMelech. So he went from even being a chaver to being one of his anash, so to speak. But we're talking about someone that you acquired much of or most of your chachma, and this is a whole discussion if it's in halachos or in svaras, but I'm not going into that now. What? Yes. So are we allowed to go to Ramesh's house to give him Shalach Manas? So he says, according to the Truma Sadeshan, which is to help him with Sudas Purim, Adarabah, it's better, it's more mahuder to go to your Rebbe. Why? Because it's like bringing a daira in the Talmud Chacham, it's bringing a gift to Talmud Chacham. And he cites a Gemara in Ksubas Daf Kofei that when someone brings a daira and a gift to a Talmud Chacham, it's as if he's bringing Bikurim. So he says bringing it to your Rebbe, giving Shalach Manas to your Rebbe is like bringing Bikurim. There's no better thing than that. But he says, but according to the B'nai Salevi, which is all about friendship and camaraderie, he says that's not, you have to have a little bit Meir Rabcha K'Meir Shemayim. That's not so appropriate. And he brings the Gemara in Brachas. The Gemara says that someone who gives Shalom l'Rabbi, he initiates, he says hello to his Rabbi, or a Machzir Shalom, he responds with Shalom, Geirim l'Shchina Shetistalik Mishal. Your Rabbi is not your friend. You have to have a certain Derech Eretz. And it's not Derech Kavod. And he says, according to that, you shouldn't give your Rabbi Hamuvak Shalach Manas. And this actually works out well. There's a sefer called Leket Yosher. Leket Yosher is a gathering, is a collection of Piskei Dinim and Minhagim from the Truma Sadeshan, one of our main players here, one of the two shittas of Shalach Manas. And it says these words, and I'll quote it. It says, "V'tzarich l'shloach manas l'chaverei." You have to send l'shloach manas to your chaver. V'kol shekein l'rabbi, and even more so to your rebbe. Why? Because he goes according to his shita. He goes according to his shita that the whole purpose of shalach manas is for lahar boy suda, so it is for the suda. And if you're bringing shalach manas, a dair and a gift to your rebbe, it's as if you're bringing bikurim. This fits perfectly with his shita. And the Shevet Sefer ends off like this, that even according to the B'nai Salevi, you're allowed to give Shalach Manas to your Rav. Even though we suggested before not, he says yes. And there's not a pgia, there's no issue with covet of your Rav, because number one, the whole isser of giving Shalom l'Rabbi is only in front of his face, but Shalai b'fanav mutter b'chal leifen, and therefore if you're giving Shalach Manas and you're giving it to somebody in his house, and you're not giving it to him directly, it's shalai b'fanav, for sure it's mutter. And he says, and even if it's b'fanav, it's also mutter. Adarab, it's the greatest mitzvah. Nichalei l'Rabba, he writes, the Rav would be so happy if his Talmud came to give him shalach manas. Which Rav wouldn't be happy if his Talmud came to He would not see it as a disrespectful thing. Adarab, it's respecting your Rav, and through him, the Talmud is being mekayim the mitzvah of shalach manas. So he says, according to both opinions, any Talmud can come to his Rav and this. But now we have another question. And we mentioned it before, is Rabbi Nichlal B'chlal Re'eyu? Can you consider Rabbi Re'eyu? He's not your friend. So there is because the pasuk says, Mishloach manas ish Re'eyu. So there's one of the Talmidim of the Chassam Sefer, Rabbi Yehuda Asad. He wrote a sefer called Shailas V'Tshuvas Mari Asad and Yehuda Yala, two Sfarim. And he writes like this, in Yehuda Yala, Simon Reish Dalet, he writes, Devadei Nichlal Rabbi B'chlal Re'eyu. He says, Re'eyu includes your Rebbe as well, not just your friends. Why? And he proves it. The Torah says, V'hafto re'acha kamoicha. Does that exclude your Rav? The Torah said, V'leisamad adam re'acha. If you see somebody that needs help and you can save his life, you have to do whatever you can to save his life. Does that exclude your Rav? Obviously not. V'hafto re'acha kamoicha includes your Rav. V'leisamad adam re'acha includes your Rav. And he gives other examples as well. So b'meila, when it says, Mishloach manas ish Re'eyu, is referring to your Rav as well. And he brings the Gemara, we find the Gemara in Shabbos in the Daf Lamed Aleph, there's a Rashi that Re'acha is referring to the Eibishter as well. The Eibishter is even called Re'acha. So for sure your Rav can be called Re'acha. And there's a Gemara Mefareshus in Megillah. The Gemara in Megillah, Daf Zayin Amud Beis, says a story that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sent to Rabbi Ishia some meat and some wine. And Rabbi Ishia felt that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was his rabbi, he was a Nasi, in the Tzutza Shal Yaakov Avinu, right? It wasn't, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was a very rich man, extremely rich. The Pascha Mal Shulchana, he had every item was available in every season. There was no such thing that there was out of season in Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's table. So he sent him a gift of Shalach Manas, and he felt that it wasn't important. The fear Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's status, this was a little bit too little. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sent back even better meat, Igla Talsa, right? The third born calf, the most meshubach they can meat. He sent them even more wine. And then he says to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Kiyamta banu Rabbeinu, u'mishlayach manas ish Re'eyu. Now you're mekayim the mitzvah. And he says to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbeinu, now you're mekayim this mitzvah. So we see that from this Gemara, he brings another raya that Re'acha is definitely, your Rebbe is included in Re'acha. Another nafkamina is in a sefer called Yafel Alev. Yafel Alev is the son of Reb Chaim Palaji, who was a very famous Turkish Paisik, Sephardish Paisik, wrote many Sfarim.
Izmir,
Izmir, right? Izmir, yes.
What's his name?
Yeah, I was kidding.
His name is Rachamim Nissim Palaji, I believe, or Nissim Rachamim. Yeah. So it says in the Simon Tafresh Sadekeh, he writes, let's say you send your friend Shalach Manas, and it gets stolen. Today we live in an era of porch pirates. And you drop it off on his porch. It's a nice bottle of wine. It's a nice platter of something, and it got stolen or it got lost in delivery. You hired a service to deliver shalach manas for you, and they lost it. So are you yaitz shalach manas or not? So he says it depends on the two reasons. According to the Truma Sedeshin, which is to help him for his suda, you're not yaitz. At the end of the day, your friend didn't receive it. If he didn't receive it, he can't put it on his table. You're not yaitz. But according to the Mendy Levi, that it's because of Re'eh's friendship. If you send your friend, let's say you drop it off on his stoop and you WhatsApp him a picture, by the way, sorry I didn't catch you this year, but here it is. And now your friend knows that you actually took the time to come to him, drop him off at Shalach Manas. It's just circumstances, he wasn't around, he wasn't available to open the door for you. So b'meila you are yaitz Shalach Manas, he writes, because you did create some friendship, some camaraderie, you did promote Abba V'Reus V'Abba. And the fact that it was lost or stolen doesn't take away from that sense of appreciation that your friend has for you. Another nafkamina is if you send Shalach Manas before Purim and it arrives on Purim. This is brought in Svarim. So there's a Magen Avram. The Magen Avram in Sifkat Nir Aleph and Simon Tafresh Tzadikei says in the name of the Baal Amar that you should not give to Aniyim Matanas Lav Yainim before Purim. Why? Because Dilma Achalei Kaidim Purim. Maybe they're going to spend the money before Purim and they're not going to have it for Purim. And the Kaf HaChaim, another great Paisik, he writes that from if you're Medayak in the Divrei of the words of the Baal Amar, but even if you sent the money before Purim, if it arrives on Purim, you are Yaitse. Regardless of when you sent it. If they actually shouldn't give it to them a few days before Purim. But if it arrives on Purim, then you're Yaitse, they chayvas matanas lav yainim. And he says the same thing would apply, V'hu adin l'mishloach manas. So even if you sent it by mail somewhere and it arrives on Purim, you're yotzei.
What if the opposite? You give it, let's say, Benji stock, and he only distributes it after Purim.
That's a good No, then it's not Matan Yisrael, yeah?
It has to be distributed on Purim.
Mineged comes along the Aruch HaShulchan, and he writes that you're not yotzei even Mishloach manas because it says...
If you give it to Benji, let's say on Purim, you're delivering your part on Purim. Now, when he actually does the distribution, when he actually gives it to the
Shmuel, because it's Tzemach Tzedek words your question a little bit stronger. The Tzemach Tzedek says there's a concept of Yad Aniyim. The Gabei Tzedakah is an extension of the poor man's hand.
Right.
Perhaps.
that strengthens my.
What did I just say? I said that the Tzemach Tzedek who words your question a little bit different. That the second it comes.
The Gabei Tzedakah gets it.
The Gabei Tzedakah gets it. He should get it.
So can you?
No, so
You'll go into these two separate inyanim.
Maskana.
Better give at least to two people who will be distributed on Purim. Remember the din of
You're certainly Mekayim the mitzvah of tzedakah.
100.
So great stuff, it's a great cause.
I'm talking about Tanz Lavin.
Matan Yisrael needs to be done on Purim.
So the question is, the Gabei Tzedakah can
you have to leave
If he's dishing some of it out on Purim, yes.
Shmuley,
And I'm sure
Shmuley,
it
you
is.
have to look around.
And I don't know.
It's a wash. Whatever you got before bringing on Purim.
Certain ones right of giving it out
Purim on Purim is for sure.
Purim,
No, but I'm saying
is
is, you can't say this specific money that you go to that name of that day because you already gave out to that name from what he got before. In a way, it's two
That's why you
carrying over.
Alright, so the Aruch HaShulchan writes that you need Mishloach manas has to be given on the day of Purim, and you cannot even send it prior to Purim. And in Svarim it's brought down that these two are dependent on the machlekes of the Trumas Hadeshin and the Menaisa Levi. According to the Trumas Hadeshin, it's all about the Mekabel. It's about the person receiving it, that he should have enough for his Suda. So even if you sent it before Purim and you got it on Purim, who cares? The fact is he got it and you're Yotzei. According to the Menaisa Levi, it's after the Sheleach. Mishloach manas, we're referring to the Sheleach, and the Mela, he sent it before Purim, it's not so glad. I don't understand that chiluk that they make in Svarim, because at the end of the day, who cares if you sent it out before Purim? If it arrives on Purim, you're still showing Ava V'achla. But anyways, another nafkamina, and this is what was mentioned before. Raw cooked food or raw food, does it have to be ready to be eaten food, or could you send a raw piece of meat? So the Magen Avraham in Siman Tafrei Tzadikei Sif Katan Yud Aleph, he writes like this. It says in Shulchan Aruch, Shetzarech L'shloach Shnei Manos Basar, which is, and he writes, Hainu Muvushalom Aroy L'achila. When it says to send Basar, it has to be Muvushal and it has to be ready to eat. And he brings this from the Maril, but the Maril writes it has to be Basar, Dogim Muvushalom. The Rambam also writes like that. And the Mishnah Brura brings this from the Pri Megadim as well. It has to be Roy L'achila Miyad. Technically, you should be able to eat it right away.
How many foods? Please clarify that.
Huh?
Please clarify how many foods and the bracha difference. There's always big.
Two foods.
What happens if in time
Different brachas or no?
Two foods.
It doesn't say it has to be.
Why not the same?
Why can't it
You want to bring two different steaks? I'll take it.
Does it have to be two different brachas?
No,
Two different foods. It doesn't have to be a food that's for a meal. Or is candy wrapped considered?
So technically, if you give your brother candies, it's not. He wouldn't eat them. For a Trumas Hadeshin, for sure it wouldn't work because it's not for the soda. But maybe if he likes, if he's a candy junkie, then maybe it's shalom berets. But it's definitely not.
your brother is not trying to do that.
But I'm sure your brother does not want candy. He wants a good ribeye. But anyways. So the Netziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, he was the son of or grandson of the Volozhiner, he was a Rosh Hashiva of Volozhin. He has a Shailas of Shuvas Hamek Shaila, and he was zeicher to appear in the Kutasichas quite a few times. So he brings a pasuk in Shmais Parak of Tes, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, Hamek Shaila. So he writes, it says in the pasuk, it's talking about the karbanis. It was raw meat, obviously. Raw meat is referred to as a mana. And he says even basar chai is referred to as mana. It doesn't have to be muvushal. He wants to say that even raw is fine. And the Makar Chaim says the same thing. He just writes a mitzvah in a mufkar to give ready to eat food. It should be cooked.
When we heard the Nasi give, the Haggadah tells us Was it raw
It
or was
doesn't
it?
say in the Gemara.
The Gemara is mashman. That it says
So guys, that it was ready to eat. It was ready to eat.
The
And
Gemara
that's the raya to the Trumas Hadeshen. Yeah. Now we could be Taila in this machlekes, and according to the Trumas Hadeshen, that it's all about having enough for the soda, so then it needs to be cooked. It needs to be raya lachila. Whatever you're giving, whatever item you're giving, has to be ready to eat. But according to the Mendy Levi, which is all about promoting friendship, if you give somebody a nice piece of meat, or if you give somebody something which is not ready to eat that he has to still prepare, you're still marbereis. You're still showing him that you care about him, that you like him, that you value him, and that you came to give him shalach manas, and you would be yaitza.
Or you just gave him a job, and not necessarily.
Or his wife a job.
Right.
So now, another shaila is, could you be yaitza mishloach manas with a sefer? If you have somebody that likes to learn, he's very studious, and he would appreciate a sefer. Or can you give somebody a nice watch, a tachshit, or a cigar? If he likes cigars, something a nice, something that he, because when it says achila, shtia is bechlal, all the poskim right. So that's simple.
Any steer or just wine?
No, shtia, any shtia, not any shtia. But obviously, wine is from within the Megillah, the Mechir Yain. It's all about the wine, Mishnah Yain. But it's certainly the best. But at the end of the day, can you give another item for shalach manas? So this question was actually asked to the Trumas Hadeshen himself in his own shilas v'tshuvas, and he says, "Sheila, there's a shaila. Bnei Adam hashachim l'chavereim b'purim chalukim b'zdinim. They sent nice garments, robes, and v'kahai gavna and other nice things. Hayim yotzim midei mishloach manas. Are they yotzim shalach manas or not? And he writes clearly, Yira de'ein yotzim. You're not yotzim. And he says why? Because the whole purpose, and his own, this is the shit that we've been discussing. The whole purpose is so how is sending somebody a cigar, or how is sending somebody a nice watch, or a robe, or another item that he would like, a gadget of sorts? How is that helping him for a soda? However, and this is what we mentioned for the Gemara before, that it says that Abaye bar Avin and Rabbi Chanina bar Avin, they would machlif suda sayu bahadei adadi. They would exchange their sudas. I mean, one would give his suda to the other one, and the other one would give his suda to the other one. What? Oh, yes. But and then he also brings that it's brought down in Paiskin that hold like the Trumas Hadeshen, that anytime it mentions manos, it's usually referring to achila v'shtia. And you have that in Rambam as well. He writes, "V'chayev yishloach shnei manos shel basar, shnei minei tafshil oichlin." So it has to be food, and there's Shulchan Aruch as well. Now the Taz also writes, "Minei oichlin v'loy b'gadim v'shar dvarim." The Taz on the Shulchan Aruch says it has to be oichlin and not b'gadim and not anything else. And the Mishnah Berurah brings this as well. Now, but in there's a shilas which was called Halachos Ktanis, written by Rabbi Yaakov Chagis, and he writes like this: that if you send ma'is, or as shalach manas, money, or ksus, clothing, bekalim, or other various items for shalach manas, if you sent it early enough in the day that I have now an expensive robe and I can easily go on my WhatsApp status and sell it and be able to buy with that money with Sayyid of Suda, he says that should be okay, that should be fine. Because hana mavia l'dei Michael k'Michael dami. That's a svara. Any hana that can bring you to suda, so to speak, that you should have a suda, is k'Michael dami. And the Bar Heitev brings this in Siman Tafrei Tzadikei. Now, according to the Mendy Levi, that what he mentioned, that the Mendy Levi writes that the whole purpose of Shalach Manas is to increase friendship. So you would say that when it comes to svarim, you are yaitza. Or a cigar, or a watch, or a piece of jewelry, whatever, you're definitely promoting Yedidus, in fact, a lot more than an average Shalach Manas that you're sending. And this is what, there's a Shilas Yeshuvas Divrei Yisrael. Rabbi Yisrael belts. It says that he brings that many Gdolei Yisrael and Chachamim would send Chidushim to one another on Purim, and they would be mitzayin on the page that it was Mishloach Manas. Because he says divrei Torah arevim, and it's like dvash lepi, and b'meila it's very sweet, and pekudei Hashem yishar b'samchei lev, it brings simcha. And then you have in Mari Asad, the Talmud of Sam Sefer that we mentioned before, he brings it clearly in one of his tshuvas. He says, accept this chidushei Torah as mishloach manas. And we know Rabbi Shlomo Alkavitz himself, he wrote the Sefer, Mendy Levi, which is a central part of the Shiur here today. He wrote that Sefer to his father-in-law. He was an ani. He was poor. He couldn't afford begashmis. Baruch Nias, he was extremely rich, and he wrote that Sefer for his father-in-law as a gift for Shalach Manas because he couldn't give him anything else. And the Ramah himself sent his father-in-law his first Sefer he wrote called Mechir Yain on Purim. So, you're going to ask, on the Menaisa Levi. So according to the Menaisa Levi, you would be Yaitse with all of these other various items. Are you going to ask that anytime it says Manais, it's usually referring to food? And how does the Menaisa Levi say that if you don't bring food, you're Yaitse? So we can answer that in Nehemiah. There's a pasuk that's referring to Rosh Hashanah. Ichlu mashmanim, v'shasu mamtakim, v'shalfu manes. Someone who doesn't have. Yeah. V'shalfu manes. And what is Metzudas Tzion, right? That manes is not food. Manes means to chelek umatan, to be able to give other items, to be able to give things. So obviously the Menaisa Levi would answer you that I hold that manes means lav dafki food, like the Metzudas Tzion, and everyone's happy. So again, when it comes to other items, according to the Menaisa Levi, you're certainly yaitza for Purim. Now another nafkamina, the ninth one, we're coming towards the end. That if Reb Shlomo Kluger, huh?
Can I go into 11?
I don't know. Whatever. If you guys want to run me out of time, you can do
His
it.
job is on the one.
I know.
No, it's not. They can't fight. Okay, I'm on the recording. Chachamim is already b'divrei, Mishkan Chacham, but I can be is already b'divrei. Fine. It says if you're sending something that's aser, Michael aser, that because of pikuach nefesh, it's mutter for someone to eat it. The makabel is allowed to eat it because he's a chayla or whatever. So if he's a Shlomo Kluger in Chachma Shlomo, in this Siman, Tavrei Tzadikei, he has if someone's a chayla, and let's say he's a chayla she'ein b'sakana, so it's asur midarabanan, or he's a chayla she'esh b'sakana, even midaraisa, he's a...
around the person's allergic.
It's a good question. But again, we can make that, we could, Stami, you're not Yotze. But we'll get there, it's a good question. But now, he says, are you allowed to give him, are you Yotze Chayvis B'Shlayach Manas? He says, basically the shaila is, do you go after the Makabel who's receiving it, and at the end of the day he's a chayla, and now Al Pi Torah it's mutter, and he's able to eat it, or do you go after the Nisan, and you have to give something that's right to you? If it's allowed for you, if it's befitting for you, you can give it to somebody else. But if it's not fitting for you, you can't give it to somebody else. So he says, according to the Trumas Hadashel L'chura, it's mutter for the chayla to eat this, and you are giving him kedei sudasa, you're giving him something to eat, and he should be yaitze. But according to the Menaisa Levi, what type of achva v'rei is saying, I shafted a tray for chicken, you happen to be deathly sick, so I'm going to send it to you because you're meaningless to me. He says, you're not giving ava v'achva, you're actually showing him that you don't care that much about him. You're sending him your sloppy seconds, something that's not good enough for your table, you're sending it to somebody else.
So you could define the two. The difference between you, one is inside the column, and one is on the nice.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Exactly, yeah.
And then every nafkamina.
Exactly. Many svarim right there. Excellent. So then there's another sefer, Pnei Maven, that writes like this: that even according to the Trumas Hadashin, if it's a Michael Shal Isser, you're never yaitze. Why? Because he brings a ritva. The ritva says that the Mishloach Manas has to be parallel to yourself, meaning something that's chashuv enough for you. Then you could send it to somebody else. But something for you is you wouldn't even look at it, you wouldn't even sneeze at it. You can't send that to somebody else. It has to be a manach hashuva. And b'meila, if it's trey for you, if it's asur for you, it has zero shivas to you. So how could you go and send it to somebody else, even if he's allowed to eat it? So he wants to say that even according to the Trumas Hadashin, in such a case, you would not be Yaitse Yidei Chayvis Shalom Manas.
I guess that's the answer that candy.
If that's what works, yeah. And now another one in Mishnah Halachos, Rabbi Nashi Klein has a shaila. What about the shalach manas to someone that's heavily intoxicated? And he says the shikr is potter. He's as if he's not. He's subconscious, so to speak. He's unconscious. He's not mechuyev in anything. He doesn't have a chiyuv of a suda b'chlal right now. So he says, if he's intoxicated,
No,
he's potter in a mitzvah. There's no reason to give it. You're not yaitze giving it to him. Exactly.
There's no makabel.
So he says that if he's intoxicated early in the day and in a couple of hours he is going to sober up, and there's still time left to the day, he says certainly you're yaitze, even according to the Trumas Hadashin, because he has time to eat it for a suda, to use it for a suda. But if he's in such a stupor, he's so intoxicated that he's going to sleep out Purim, according to the Trumas Hadashin, you are not yaitze. He wants to say that according to the Menaisa Levi, you might be yaitze, but I don't see that the guy would wake up the next day and see that you gave him shalach manas, so you promoted friendship, perhaps, but it's a little iffy. Now, the last one, what happens if you get shalach manas from a food that you're machmir not to eat? So for example, Machne Chaim also...
Like an addict, you may,
Huh?
like an addict, if selling alcohol, you may.
Or maybe someone that's
They have
allergic.
to. No,
What
or they have
Darius
to.
mentioned before.
If you give somebody challah,
Pasakum, we're going to, yeah. So now he has a suffix. If somebody that's not nizar from Pasakum or Mechemasakum. Now Chemasakum, in order to make Chema, we know that it's not from Chalav Tmeir. It's impossible to make Chema from Chalav Tmeir. So Me'ikr Adin, it's kosher, but we don't eat this. So B'meila, if Reuven sends Shimon, his friend, such my Chalam from Mishloach Manes, and Shimon is makbid not to eat this, is Reuven Yaitzi Yidei Chayvasai, and he remains with a tzarech and gadol. And l'chura, we could also attach it to these two reasons. According to the Trumas Hadashim, you're not yaitze. Because what am I supposed to do with it? I'm not eating pasakum, I'm not eating chamasakum or gvinasakum. I don't want any of this. I can't use it. It means nothing for my soda. So b'meila, you're not yaitze. But according to but even according to the Mnaisa Levi, you could say that you're not yaitze. Because we said before from the Ritva, it has to be something chashuv, something that is not good enough for me, or that I'm going to send to somebody else. That's not showing chshivas. And by the same token, even if it is good enough for me, even if Reuven is going to have chalavakum or pasakum, but he wants to send that to Shimon, Shimon doesn't want it. It's not good for him. It's something detrimental to him. It's something it's metamtem amayach v'alevi. He doesn't want to touch it. It's muktzamach mazmiyas. So even according to the Mendy Levi, you're not promoting friendship. You're actually giving me a headache. Then now I have to throw this out and make sure that my kids don't eat it or drink it. So Lemaisa, it's brought down in Piskei Teshuvos, and I believe that's the halacha. So we have two different reasons. We are very careful to be yaitze mishloach manes, that it should be a liba de kulei alma. It should be sai, according to the Trumas Hadashim, that somebody should be able to, at least to one person, that you should be able to put it on his table for a suda, and say according to the Mendy Levi that it should promote ava v'reyos v'achva, brotherhood, and lipshat. And after you're mekayim that mitzvah once at least, then you want to give somebody a nice bottle of wine and a nice watch. I'm sure you only want to be yaitze to the Mendy Levi, it's fine. But to be yaitze the mitzvah, you have to be yaitze at least one time, a liba de kulei alma in a mehudadik way. And we should, it should be the will of the Eibishter that we should be zeichet to Mishloach manis from the Eibishter. It says Mishloach manis ishla re'eyu, each is Hashem. Hashem ishla chama re'eyu is us, right? And we would want a Mishloach manis from the Eibishter, a liba de beide shittas, both shittas. Number one, we want according to the Trumas Hadashim, the Suda of the Shara Bar and the Leviasan with the Yayin HaMeshumar. And then, so we'll be yaitze this, the reason of the Trumas Hadashim and Behidr. And then when that happens, Mashiach will already be here in the Rambam in the end of Hilchos Malachim. It'll be cooked. Don't worry. It'll be just fine. And the Rambam in the end of Hilchos Malachim writes that when Mashiach comes, there's not going to be like Kinov, like Tachlis, like Rav. There's going to be a better world. There's nothing. There's going to be no negativity, only positivity. So we're going to have the idea of the Mendy Levi, Av, Shalom, Rereus. There's going to be a brotherhood, a unity amongst Klal Yisrael. And it's only going to be Ladas Hashem B'Lav.
According to that, she gives Achmas earlier in the day.